Hey friends, and welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, insane people, and all that kind of stuff. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet for more Reddit content, and we're getting right into today's stories. My neighbor is using a tablet stick to peek inside my apartment. I moved at the end of February into a condo, so it has been only 3 weeks. 3 times at different times, I have seen some sort of device on a stick that looked like a tablet over the dividing fence of my patio and the neighbor's. I have glass sliding doors, so I saw the device while I was in my living room. At first, I thought it was just reaching up for something and didn't bother much. The next time, I saw it being turned slowly toward my living room, while the person was trying to keep it steady. Tonight, it was reaching closer and I got the chance to see it about 3 feet away, and noticed the adjusting bolts and exactly what it was. He placed it down when he saw me and heard me get upset about it as I was talking on my phone. But I got the chance to take a picture. It was a tablet on a selfie stick. The older man that lives next door works for the county and is part of the HOA. I have spoken with him once, and the complex manager raved about how nice he was and that they'd known each other for 35 years. So I'm trying to figure out the best route. What I know is that I live in Winter Park, Florida, and this is criminal and falls under statute 810.14. But more important, I am mortified, freaked out, and feel very uncomfortable just sitting in my living room with the blackout blinds down. I am a single mom of a toddler and I am usually home by myself, which I am sure that he knows by now. If it wasn't for the pictures I was able to take of the tablet, I probably wouldn't consider officially reporting. And for the record, I do not walk around in my underwear or less while the blinds are open, and I'm sure he's done this more than the 3 times I've witnessed it. I've also been sitting quietly outside and noticed by the sound how unusually slow he opened the screen door but didn't put much thought into it. Now it makes sense. I have an effing creep perv as a neighbor. My coworker loves taking credit for other people's work. Then he got exposed. I work as a software engineer, and in my team we follow the usual process of writing code, reviewing it, testing it, and deploying it. One of my coworkers, Steve, had a habit of taking credit for other people's work in front of management. He isn't a bad developer, but he loves making it seem like he was doing more than he actually was. I'm quite introverted, so I don't usually speak up in meetings unless I have to. Calling someone out directly doesn't come naturally to me, so I usually just let things slide. During a big project, I spent days fixing a complicated bug. The problem ran deep, and the fix had to work across different parts of the code. If you hadn't actually worked on it, it was pretty hard to follow. After a lot of testing, I finally got it done. At the next team meeting, before I could even say a word, Steve jumped in and started explaining my fix as if it was his. He kept saying things like, "We decided to, and our approach was to," making it sound like he was the person behind it. I was annoyed, but I kept quiet. The next day, another bug popped up in the same area of code. Our manager turned to Steve and said, "Since you worked on this, can you patch it?" And that's when the fun started. Steve froze. The thing is, if you didn't actually write the fix, it wasn't easy to understand how it all fit together. He had no idea where to even begin. He tried stalling and even sent me a message asking if I could explain the logic of the code real quick. I told him that I was busy at the moment and that I will catch up with him later on. I didn't. After 5 hours of struggling, he finally admitted in the team chat and wrote something like, "Actually, I didn't write this part. Maybe OP can take a look?" I replied, "Of course, I'll check it." 10 minutes later, I had it fixed. Our manager came over and congratulated me. We were chatting for a bit, and before heading off, he made a deliberate comment about how great it was having someone who actually understands what we are working on. Steve didn't say a word. You, Steve. Woman always hides from me in the laundry room of our apartment building. What is going on with her? I live in an apartment complex that has a shared laundry room in the basement. You get to the basement through a door from the stairwell. On the other side, there's a hallway with cellar compartments on one side. On the other side, there's the laundry room. The hallway is where I first saw the woman about 3 years ago when I moved there. I went to do my laundry one day, and when I stepped into the hallway and waited for the light to come on, I saw a dark figure with long hair slipping into one of the door frames for a split second. I felt like my blood froze, but told myself that I'd only imagined her from already feeling creeped out. I told my boyfriend about it later that night, and a few weeks later he said he'd seen her too. From then on, I saw her every now and then. The encounters were creepy, but I kind of came to expect them and ignored her, figuring that to be the polite and empathetic response, so to speak, since she didn't want to be seen. I suspected her to have some sort of phobia. Sometimes I'd see her in the hallway, and sometimes she'd already be in the laundry room, quickly getting behind a wall when I entered. Then I'd hear her leave quietly while I was leaning over my washing machine, even leaving her things behind. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I was alone down there, figuring that she'd surely sometimes hide successfully. One time she crouched behind a washer waiting for me to leave. I took that as her getting more comfortable with me. That was the creepiest encounter until one night I found a key in the garage. I wanted to post a note about it at the main entrance of the building and did so on my side. I wanted to post another one at the entrance of the other building that shares the garage. You can get there through the basement, which is also shared. When I entered the hallway, I saw her on the other end, but she quickly closed the door as always, disappearing back into the stairwell of the other building. I was already feeling uneasy, but still walked towards the door, the note in my hand. When I entered the stairwell of the other building and the lights came on slowly, I didn't see her, so I thought she'd gone back inside her apartment or something. Then I left the door open, thinking I'd go back in a minute. I went up one set of stairs towards the entrance, and as the stairs made a turn, I looked back down and saw her standing there all of a sudden inside the hallway I just came out of in complete darkness. She stood behind the door and had closed it just enough so I could see her face. She stared at me through dark sunglasses, a blank expression on her face, and didn't pull back at all this time, didn't even flinch. She must have stood behind the door on the other side as I went through it, and then quickly gotten inside right behind me. We must have been so close to each other for a few seconds. It's the longest I've ever had the chance to look at her. I'm not proud of it, but I panicked and ran up the remaining stairs and out of the building. I had to walk to my entrance in the rain wearing only slippers. Since that day, I'm not so sure about her not wanting to be noticed anymore. I kind of feel like if that were the case, it wouldn't happen all the time, right? She'd hear someone coming and already hide or leave, instead of waiting for them to come in and see her for a moment. She also didn't need to watch me at all. She could have just shut the door behind her. I mean, she's completely harmless, obviously, but I don't get her and can't help but feel vaguely threatened by her. I feel bad about it, but all the crouching, sneaking, hiding, waiting, and watching now has a predatory feel to it. The time I stopped a pilot from flying under the influence. I kinda made a citizen's arrest of a pilot from the control tower. Middle of the night, I was working a solo shift in the control tower at Flint, Michigan. A Cherokee 6 calls up, says he wants to taxi out and do touch and goes. Note, he had the airplane out of the hangar running and had already taxied a couple of 100 yards to the hold point, as is routine. He was slurring his words, repeating himself, had forgotten to turn his nav lights on, etc. Clearly in no condition to fly. And from the laughing and carrying on I could hear in the background, he'd brought some buddies with him. I was half a mile away in the tower, so couldn't really see anything. All I knew was what I was hearing on the radio. Technically, I had no right to refuse taxi or takeoff clearance based on that, but I tried to reason with him over the radio, told him it was too late to fly, that we had rules about noise at night, not true in those days. Just generally tried to talk him into putting the airplane away and going home. He wasn't having it, got belligerent, and kept insisting he was going to fly whether I cleared him or not. So I called the city maintenance worker and told him to park his truck in front of the airplane, while I called the cops. He did, then got out of the truck and ran when it looked like the pilot was going to taxi the airplane right into him. He told me later it stopped with the spinning prop just inches away from the truck. Cops finally showed up, had a hard time dealing with the situation because the plane was still running. The pilot refused to shut it down and the cops didn't know how to shut it down. They had a standoff for about 15 minutes, finally took the guy into custody. They said he was totally sloshed, had 2 guys with him that he'd only met in the bar that night. He'd been bragging that he owned his own airplane. They didn't believe him and things went as you can imagine from there. I got a verbal attaboy from the cops that night, and my chief the next day, then never heard another word about it. Please note incidents like this are very unusual. Most pilots are very responsible about having 8 hours from bottle to throttle. Block the street, I'll just leave my car there. I went to visit my parents last week and saw my neighbor's old car parked there, which reminded me of the one and only interaction I had with him about 21 years ago. The neighbor still has, I just saw it last week, a very old car in somewhat decent shape. I'm sure holds sentimental value for him, but it's not a fancy or a rare model, just old, maybe a late 70s or early 80s. At the time, my wife and I had just married and we were saving money by living in an apartment that belongs to my parents, right next to their house. Both my wife and I had each our own cars, and on that Saturday I needed to take mine to the shop for something simple, an oil change or similar, I don't remember exactly what. We planned to drop my car and then go have breakfast nearby, so I drove my car and my wife followed me in hers. As I was driving down the main avenue, I hit some traffic, so I turned onto a parallel, narrower, one-way street. That's when I came across this idiot going the wrong way and blocking the entire road. In front of him was another car facing the correct direction, unable to pass. The driver of that car honked and yelled, but the jerk refused to move. After a while, the frustrated driver gave up, backed out, cursed at him, and left. I pulled up in front of him and honked too, but of course, he didn't budge. Instead, he started tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, clearly showing that he had no intention of moving. Then I looked in my rearview mirror and saw my wife waiting behind me. That's when I got an idea. I shut down my engine, exited the car, locked it, and yelled to the guy something like good luck or F you, I don't remember. I hopped in my wife's car and told her to back up. She was confused at first, but quickly caught on, put it in reverse, and we drove back to the main street, leaving him stuck there. The look on his face was priceless. We drove one block down, then looped around from the other end, technically also going the wrong way to see what he was doing. Sure enough, he was struggling to maneuver his car around mine. The only way he could get out was by reversing and making a U-turn. As he was doing this, he spotted us parked nearby, watching and laughing. His jaw dropped. I threw in a snarky remark, got back into my car, and drove off, this time in the correct direction. A few weeks later, I was driving in the area and I saw him with the flashers on and the hood up. I drove a pretty common car and slowed down as I got near to him. He approached me, and when I was very close, he finally recognized me. I gave him the finger and sped away. Last week, I saw he still has that same piece of junk parked outside his house. I can only hope it stranded him many more times over the years. Anyway, friends, that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button. And also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more Reddit shenanigans like this. So I'm out of here. Take care, and I'll see you next time.